Folks, hello and welcome to another fantastic RfRx show. My name is Eric Wells, and I am the support group director for Recovering from Religion. And with me, co-hosting, is my good friend Helen Green. She is a support group leader for the virtual chapter, as well as the Helpline Hero Supporter. So, Helen, welcome.
Hello, everyone. It's going to be happy Monday. This is going to be a great talk. Like I said, that we always have like the best people on who give like the best talks, and I'm really excited to hear what our speaker has to say this evening. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah. So at the beginning of every RfRx, we have a poll, and today is no different. This poll has one question, and the question is, did you know about the Wisconsin v. Yoder U.S. Supreme Court decision before tonight's discussion? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. We're going to let that poll go for a while until we start to read and introduce our guest. And so while that poll is going, let's talk about what RfRx is. A lot of you, this isn't your first time, but there may be a few of you who this is your first time here. Well, RfRx is where we bring on guests and talk about topics that may be relevant to folks who seek out the services of recovering from religion. This isn't a replacement for the online community or for the helpline or for the support groups at all, but instead it's really a complement to those services, to those communities. We have guests who come on and talk about some foundations that may be interested in some religions that we may not know about, and also more importantly, to supply and provide some great advice and some coping skills too for the things that we're experiencing. If you've got some questions, topic suggestions, inquiries, death threats, you can send those to our email address, rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. And if you have kind of missed part of or any of these RfRxs, or if you want to kind of look back on what we talked about, you can go to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/recoveringfromreligion. And I've dropped those links into the chat, and they'll also be in the description as well. So we've been throwing around the initialism RFR for a little bit, and you may not know what that stands for. Those letters, those three awesome little letters, RFR, stand for Recovering from Religion. And we here at RFR, we have a mission statement, and that is to offer hope, healing, and support to those who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief. And we have tailored quite a few services, quite a few programs around our mission statement to help us pursue that. And the first one we're going to talk about is healing. And so healing, we have set up what's called the helpline. And the helpline is where there are volunteers that are called helpline agents, and they show up and they're here to provide an empathetic ear with absolutely no judgment or criticism. And these folks are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, via both chatting online at the website, or like if you're on your phone, you can go to the website, you can chat with them. Or if you want to talk to somebody too, if you want to hear some voice, if you want those sound waves to come out of your phone and into your eardrum, then we have got some agents standing by who are ready to talk to you as well. In addition to that, we have curated a ton of resources that may be useful to you. For example, if you are struggling with the fear of hell, or if you are an ex-Muslim and you're looking to find some resources, then check out our resources page, recoveringfromreligion.org/resources. We have quite a few things that kind of pursue the hope part of our mission. And this is kind of where we share and listen to some stories about how folks have dealt with some trauma, how folks have struggled transitioning out of religion, and just the things that come up after we transition out of religion, or after we've kind of identified and begun to deal with the religious trauma that we've gone through. And through that, the programs that we've developed are both the blog. It's a fantastic blog. I strongly recommend you check it out. medium.com/excommunications, as well as our podcast. So you can check out both of those things, and I put the links into the chat as well. Keep going, Helen. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, Google Drive does not like me, so keep going, honey.
You bet. So the next part of our mission, I'm just talking a lot this evening. The next part of our mission is support. And Helen has this highlighted, but I'm grateful that she can't get her drive up because I love talking about the support groups. These are peer support groups. This is face-to-face, in-person, or virtual meetings where we're able to kind of share and talk about the things that we're struggling with when it relates to religion. These are safe spaces, places where you can share those things that you may not feel comfortable sharing in your current community of church-related friends or family or what have you. We currently have 65 groups around the world. And our latest one, which I'm really excited about, is in the Baltic Sea area, which is like Sweden and Finland and part of Russia, Estonia and Latvia. Just fantastic. I'm really, really excited to have Eastern Europe kind of served out there. And so if you are in that area, if you're watching that and you're in the Baltics area, check out that meetup group. We have a map of all of the groups on the link in the chat, meetup.com. And we also have 2 virtual chapters. One is just a regular virtual chapter. It's kind of like a catch-all that's not tied to a specific geographical place. And we also have a women's only virtual chapter, which is, well, just like what the name says, for those who identify as women, female, or gender fluid, what have you, non-binary. Next up, the Secular Therapy Project. The helpline that we talked about and the support groups that we talked about, those are both peer supports. It's not professionally, the people like myself, I help host support groups every now and then, and I am definitely not professionally trained. I am just a peer, like you out there, and just helping to listen and be there for you. But if we may need more than what peer support can offer. And so we've set the Secular Therapy Project up as a directory where I, as a client, can connect with folks who are with professional mental health professionals to man, Helen, I'm getting some brain farts all over the place.
Eric, I just like listening to you talk, Eric. I'm totally lying about the internet. My Google Drive not being responsive. I just want to listen to you speak.
Oh boy. So this is a directory where I'm able to create an account and connect with secular therapists who have been heavily vetted to make sure that they have the appropriate licensing in their state or country, to make sure that they maintain a secular practice so you won't run the risk of being sent home to prey upon your problems, and also to make sure that they run evidence-based treatments. You can find those, and you can create an account and find a secular therapist near you at seculartherapy.org. Still having trouble, Helen?
Yep.
Okay. One other program
I just want to listen to you talk.
One other program that we have is the online community. And this is a platform on Slack where you're able to connect with people with similar backgrounds. Say you're an ex-Muslim or you're an ex-Mormon and you want to connect with other ex-Muslims or ex-Mormons, or say you are finding that you're now a secular parent and you don't quite know what to do about that. You can join this Slack community and connect with folks with those similar backgrounds. Like, I am not an ex-Mormon, so I may not fully understand what ex-Mormons are going through, but we've created a community of ex-Mormons who can relate to what you may be struggling with. And that goes for all sorts of other issues, LGBT plus concerns, and secular parenting, like I said, even military. This isn't publicly available. You have to kind of answer a few questions from one of the helpline agents and to make sure that you're a right fit, and then they'll invite you to the Slack program. Next up, we have got the Atheist Community of Discord. They are a fantastic bunch of people. They are currently streaming this program into their Discord channel, and it's just an amazing group of people to have some fantastic conversations and discussions with, and just make some new friends. If that's what you're looking for, check out the Atheist Community Discord. Everybody you see here kind of running this program, we are all volunteers. Everybody on the helpline, everybody in the support group program, even the board, those are all volunteers. This is a volunteer run organization. So we couldn't do it without the volunteers. I know that when I was coming out of religion and kind of stepped up to become a support group leader, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to get into. And I still was struggling with a lot of issues that were popping up after I kind of transitioned out of religion. And being a part of support group and volunteering for this, I've gotten way more out of it. I'm a better person because I was volunteering. So it helped me kind of provide some meaning and some purpose in my life. And we're always in need of volunteers. So if that's something, if you feel ready and you've got some time, check out recoveringfromreligion.org/volunteer. Okay. So that's enough with the intro. Let's get into the meeting format. For the first hour, we're going to have our discussion with our fantastic guest. This is a two-time guest coming up. And then during that discussion, you're probably going to have some questions. And please ask those questions in the chat, both here in the Zoom, or if you're over on Discord, we're monitoring that as well. So ask your questions. You can tag either Helen or myself, and we'll collect them. And during the second part of this meeting or the show, we're going to have about a 20 or 30-minute Q&A session. Once we're done with that, we're going to have some closing thoughts by our fantastic RFR board member, Gwen. And then once she's kind of wrapped up, we're going to turn off the recording and just hang out. This is open the lines up, and you'll be able to ask some follow-up questions and just talk and share what's been going on with you. So that's the meeting format. That's kind of the show format. Helen, would you like to introduce our guest?
Absolutely. Torah Bontrager escaped the middle of the night at age 15 so she could go to high school. She's the author of The Amish Girl in Manhattan, and to her knowledge, the first female Amish escapee to graduate from an Ivy League school. Her story has been featured on MTV and Forbes.com, among others. Today, she advocates for the right of Amish children to go to school beyond the 8th grade. Torah founded the Amish Heritage Foundation, which focuses on making education a federal right and overturning the Supreme Court case, Wisconsin versus Yoder. So go ahead, Torah. Go ahead and get started. I'm excited for this talk. I'm okay.
Torah, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a delight to be back here with you again. The second round, I love RfRx and the whole community. So, I guess we'll get started on what is the Amish Heritage Foundation. And I have some slides, so let me see if I can get that going.
The previous RfRx you guested on, we talked about the Amish, and that was just a very revealing and fantastic discussion. And I'm really glad that we did that before, so we can kind of set up what the Amish Heritage Foundation is in existence for. I'm really, really happy about that. I feel like I got a good primer from you last time.
Good. So this was made for RfRx, the Foundation Spotlight, and that's our website. And here's a photo of one style of traditional Amish buggies. This is the Pennsylvania style. And then this photo here is of the Midwestern Amish style of caps that the women wear. So before I go into our mission and vision, I just wanted to give a little bit of our backstory or origins. We were established in 2018, and we're the first organization in 300 plus years of history to advocate for Amish people without a religious price tag. That means we're secular. And,
wow.
When we say Amish people, it means practicing and non-practicing Amish. So that's something I'll go into a little bit more later about the meaning of Amish. And then our flagship event is our annual conference on Wisconsin versus Yoder's continuing negative impact on the Amish population. And we will have our third annual conference this spring, which I'll talk more about later at the end. Our mission and vision is that we're committed to empowering Amish women and children with education past the 8th grade so they can exercise their human and constitutional rights to create and choose their futures. And it's really important for us at the Amish Heritage Foundation to continually get this message out that we only have an 8th grade education, and it's not even a public school education at that, it's even less than that. And we need to have a basic level of educational rights in order to even exercise our what constitutional rights we do have. And we envision that one day Amish children will have the right to learn beyond the 8th grade, including the right to learn about science, technology, engineering, math beyond arithmetic. We only have about a 3rd or 4th grade average level of math for the average Amish adult. Civics, law, philosophy, and the fine arts. We're not taught any of that. The average Amish adult has about a 5th grade English comprehension level. And speaking of English, we speak English as a second language. So that's another thing that most people are not aware of, is that we speak Amish, not Pennsylvania Dutch, which is what you will see everywhere, but it's not Dutch. It's also not Pennsylvania German, because there are people who do say they speak Pennsylvania German, but it's a different type of German than what we Amish speak. Or we do have a language based on the socio-political criteria of languages. So for example, some of the Scandinavian languages, people can understand each other, but they're still considered languages and not dialects. So that's the argument we're making in terms of the language. And then also, of course, our future vision is that education will be a constitutional right for every US citizen. That means on a federal level, it's an explicit right, which, if you don't know about it by now, no one in the US has a right to any education at all, not even to read, speak, or write.
That was really surprising when we talked about that last time. We just briefly glossed over it. I know we'll go into a little bit more this time around, but both learning that the Amish only have an 8th grade education, and now hearing that they have less than that when it comes to English and mathematics, but also understanding that it's not a right to have that. That's really surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's mind blowing, and it was a struggle in the beginning to kind of like figure out the messaging, because so much of what was sort of the pop culture understanding about us Amish was that it's all peaceful, gentle folk, nostalgia, idyllic kind of society, and the few people who were aware of the Wisconsin versus Yoder case basically looked at it as, well, it's an Amish-centric case. It doesn't affect us. It doesn't matter. And when I finally hit on, oh, actually, no one has a right to education at all, that was then when things shifted towards people starting to care who weren't Amish and starting to get it, that this case really does matter, does affect you personally. And so speaking of how all of this came about, I created this foundation as a result of when I was around 13 years old. I told myself at that time that if I made it after my escape, I'd help the ones left behind. And it was inspired by Harriet Tubman's story, which I read around 13 years old, maybe younger. And I was so inspired by the Underground Railroad and just that fierceness and boldness of Harriet Tubman for one's rights. And I really, related to that, identified with that struggle because I too felt like I was enslaved. I was considered a piece of property owned by my parents or the church, and not, I didn't even have the same rights as someone assigned male at birth in the Amish. Like literally, if you are born, female or assigned female, you do not have the same rights as the males. And so Harriet Tubman's story was something that never left me. And that really kind of like was the voice, like expressed for me, verbalized what I was feeling.
So this was at the age of 13 that you realized you needed to leave this community? Like that's that is like 8th grade or so, or just a little after, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So 13, I'm thinking I probably was a little bit younger, but it's a little vague because at 11 years old, I made the decision to escape. So I was actually even younger. But so I'm unsure. Did I read the story at 11 about Harriet Tubman or a little bit later? It was somewhere around that time. So I always err on the side of a little bit later because even 13 years old is pretty young. But 11 was when I read the Bible from beginning to end, cover to cover, in search for answers. And that's when I felt that I felt it was unethical for me to remain practicing Amish, in short. But then
at 11 years old, you felt that? Wow.
Yeah.
It was that obvious to you? That's
well,
impressive.
I wish I was that astute at 11 years old.
Same here.
Well, I'm not the typical child when it comes to that. I do feel that most, or a good number of Amish children, I would say the vast majority of Amish children are not happy. They're not getting answers. They're not being allowed to express themselves. You're not allowed to question. I mean, that's part of the whole forcing you to stop learning at the 8th grade and restricting what you do learn through that time. It's all a way to very effectively control the Amish institution, the whole population. And I feel that most children they just give up, or they just don't see a way out, and they resign to remaining practicing. And the few that do manage to escape and go on don't value education, don't see the value of it. Or if they see the value of it, they're so undereducated, so ill-prepared that they can't even pass a GED to get into community college. I mean, that's a repeating story that we see, that I've seen. So I'll get to that a little bit later, where one of the projects we have in the works to hopefully solve that. But what I wanted to do here a little bit more is just cover, well, who are the Amish, for anyone who's not familiar with the Amish. And the traditional Amish are in the US, United States, and Canada. They're a minority population of around 350,000. That's something across 30 or 31 states in rural America. So you're not going to see them in the big cities or even the medium-sized cities. We're out in the rural country area. And in Canada, there's probably about 4 to 6 provinces with Amish communities. All of these statistics are things that we need to get funding for, to research. So we're just doing our best based on what we personally know. And then in terms of the average family, that's 8 to 9 children, really depends on where in the range of like super conservative to relatively modern you are within the traditional Amish spectrum. So people tend to have less children the more materialistically modern they are. When I say modern, that means you're allowed to have bikes and maybe use computers for your business, have phones in the barn. That's the modern end of the traditional Amish spectrum.
Why is it so difficult to get an accurate number of the people in these communities?
It's not if we have funding to do that. It takes funding to go out to the communities and do all the groundwork, the legwork of getting the data. And, making phone calls is not to make phone calls and ask somebody, okay, so what's the number of your community right now, they're not going to give the information, or if they give the information, we can't verify it. And that is for the communities that have access to a phone. And then there's a huge percentage of the population that don't have access to a phone. And so even in cases of emergency, they'll have to run to their non-Amish neighbor and ask to use the phone to call an ambulance or something.
Wow. So cell phones are not something that they have access or are allowed to have access to?
It depends, again, on the where you are on the spectrum of from super conservative to, liberal in the sense of the traditional Amish. What I've seen over the past 25 years, since it's been 25 years now that I've escaped, which just is, I can't believe it's been that long. But I've seen this trend towards allowing the use of a cell phone more and more. Like even in my one side of my family, who tends to be a lot more conservative, they are allowing cell phone use. And you're not, of course, not supposed to bring it into the house. You're going to go to hell if you take the cell phone inside the house. But you have to leave it out in the barn or in the phone shack or something.
So that's why. Go ahead, Helen. Sorry.
I was curious. I don't know if you covered this the last time, so excuse me if you did. Like, where did that tradition come from? Where, like, electricity and using anything that of like the real world was sinful, and you're going to go to hell because of it?
Well, I've pinpointed it to pretty much the turn of the century. It seems that that's where things really sort of got extreme. And not that there wasn't, sort of extreme things going on before, but it's sort of like when electricity came about, the light bulb, the cameras, all those things came about at the turn of the century. All of a sudden, the certain faction of the Amish, whoever was in power, decided that this is not acceptable, that this is straying from the roots of the Amish, or it's becoming too, like, we're not separated enough from the rest of the world. So there's this very clear religious mandate that we need to be separated from, we're not of this world. Like we are in this world temporarily. Like we're not supposed to be of
You're better than us heathens that use cell phones and lighting.
And it actually even goes further back than that. Like it really is rooted in the origins of the Amish, the founder Jacob Ammon back in what is now Switzerland and Germany. He raised a fit, even way back then in like the 1690s, that the Mennonites are too fashionable or too worldly, and the Amish, like especially the women, need to stay buttoned up and all of that. Yeah. So it's very, very much rooted in just general, Protestant Calvinist, traditional Christianity even. So if you do some, or research into Christianity, you see that. And even, just Catholicism with this, the self, what is it called? The self-flagellation. Am I pronouncing that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
you want to talk about Catholic guilt?
Yeah. It's like the more we suffer, the better our chance at getting into heaven. That's another thing to be aware of, is that we Amish are not promised that we'll get into heaven. No matter how perfect we are, how well we follow the rules, the church law, we may not get into heaven. There's a real chance we might not. So at sort of like it's the suffering, the harder your life is, the more you suffer. That's sort of a gauge for, the better your chances at being approved by God to get into heaven.
There's a 90s song, like the more you suffer, the more it shows you really care, or something like that. I don't think an Amish individual wrote that, but it was like a rock song. But
It was an Eastman song about a breakup.
And so the families are pretty darn large, and it sounds, and from what we talked about last time, there aren't really new members coming in from the outside. So it seems in order to keep this religion alive, you have to have large families in order to keep the population going, it sounds like.
Well, people who say that the Amish, population is the largest growing, group in America, or whatever that, those people say who claim to be experts on as Amish, are not factoring in the death rate as well. They're looking at the birth rate, but not at the death rate. So over, maybe, yes, the population is growing this year, but next year it's going to drop off. It sort of balances. And the only, there are, of course, over the course of 300 years, there has been, a population increase, because in the beginning, even if you had 14 kids, which some Amish even today have, a lot of them died because the medical care wasn't as advanced. So my grandmother, one of my grandmothers, had 16 children, and 5 or more died. And probably most of them, if not all, would be living today if she had them today, just because of the quality of medical care. And so for some conservative, the more conservative end of the Amish have more children, or the ones who are wealthier have more children. And over time, the ones on the more modern end of the spectrum, really modern end, they're starting to decrease the number of children, because they don't need as much child labor anymore, because they're allowed to use computers, for example, or they switch from this agrarian 1970s and early agrarian life to being allowed to make an income that's off the farm. And so that also determines the number of children that people have, because you can't who are you going to hire if you're not making much and you're struggling as a farmer, or if you're not allowed to use modern technology to compete with modern competitors? So Wisconsin versus Yoder was really about child labor, the ability to retain child labor, not about religious rights. Even the Amish don't care. I mean, they had been given all these accommodations by the state for religious exemptions in terms of whatever fits they had about the curriculum. Over and over, the state had exempted their children from participating in gym, especially the girls, or the girls being allowed to wear special Amish uniforms that didn't show their ankles or whatever it was. I'm a little joking here, but it really was, they had to wear uniforms that that Jonas Yoder's wife made, because Jonas, that was one of his, problems with the girls being part of gym at the public school. So at the end of the day, it was really just about being able to put your children to work for free for you. And that's still the case.
So the women in the Amish community seems to be like labor making factories. Is that kind of, is that accurate?
I mean, there's a more blunt term for what a woman's role is. It's, you're supposed to produce kids.
You're a broodmare.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's your job. And even in the Wisconsin versus Yoder document, if you look at the document that that final case document, when the decision was made, by the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court actually agreed with the Amish church that if a child is born a girl, her only future is to become a housewife. That is the actual language in there.
Wow. The Supreme Court isn't known for fantastic decisions. Oh my gosh.
And it's not any better for the boys. If you're a boy, you're supposed to become a farmer, like the farmer, the housewife. Those were the exact terms in there. But of course, if you're a boy, you get to bend the rules a lot more because you're superior. You're born, God puts you in a better position or a higher position than if you're a girl.
Got it. Jeez.
You have to have a penis to have power, basically. If you don't have a penis.
Yeah. I mean, we can't, what if you're, LGBTQ,
yep.
If you're intersex or anything like that, that's supposedly just blanket denied. No, that doesn't exist. That's not possible. Okay. Even though they know that exists. And there are bishops and other clergy members who actively assault boys. And it gets even worse than that.
So even some of the nuanced gender distinctions are not even recognized. It's just purely binary in the Amish communities, from the sounds of it. Yes.
I had a conversation with one of my cousins within this past year. Actually, it was less than a year. It was earlier this year. And she brought up, how something about I think it was probably in the context of gay marriage, and she would have vomited if she could have. Like, that was how much she was against it, and how much disgust and all of that she had for that. And I just I want to say things and talk and try to educate them, but I also know if you're that resistant to it, it's a waste of my breath. It's a better use of my time to talk to those who are a little bit more open to the possibility. But at that sort of response, that vitriol is just, it's not worth my energy. But that is what you're taught. It's a sin. You're not, everything that the religious right, especially the super conservative religious right in mainstream America, whatever their views are against LGBTQ rights and gay marriage, same-sex marriage, that's even more the belief among the Amish.
I have to imagine for the queer community that is in the Amish community, it has to be extra traumatizing because there's no secular resources available to you. You're just kind of stuck, dealing with these emotions and feelings, and just being in this community that will not accept you. And from what you're describing is very hostile towards you for if they find out that you're anywhere on the queer spectrum.
Yes. I've heard stories, a lot more stories from the men than I have from the women. Women are just inside the practicing Amish community, are just not reaching out or coming forward. And that's a product of the lack of access. Simply because of your gender, you are controlled a lot more and don't have the kind of access to the outside that the males do. So the men have, it's easier for them to reach out to the Amish Heritage Foundation, to find us, to look online and find us and see that, we're welcoming, we're supportive and all of that. And so I've had lots of conversations about, with men who are still inside the practicing Amish community. And it hasn't changed the view, since I escaped 25 years ago. The same thing, if it's found out that the guy is questioning or gay, he's told marry a good Amish girl and you'll get over it. Basically, that's the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And repent, of course you have to repent and confess in front of the entire, baptized church membership. And then you're supposed to marry a good Amish girl and that will solve everything. And of course it doesn't.
Right.
And so many of the men have double lives. They're able to do that because they can go into town or go, somewhere in the name of like, oh, we're taking care of business, we're going on a business trip, or we're getting supplies or something like that. And so they can hook up with somebody or go to, a sex worker, something like that. And that's how they manage. But the women, I don't know, or those who don't even know that such a thing as like being gender fluid is a thing, there's just so much work that needs to be done. But none of it can be done effectively over the internet. We have to do it in person and go into these communities in person, or, train people who are there on the ground, who have the trust of the Amish, the local Amish, and get those support and resources through them, like funneled through them. And even then, it's a slow and long process, because if you are questioning, especially a girl or a they them, you don't even know what a they them is. It's like, who are you going to trust? Right?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is just being so afraid to speak out or talk to someone because you don't know how you're going to be punished.
So on top of the the usual religious trauma that folks experience coming out of religions, we've also got a lack of really significant lack of education and understanding about what the world is and how it works around them. What is so this sounds like that's why the Amish Heritage Foundation was kind of set up, to do some of this training for both outside the Amish communities and inside the Amish communities, and advocate for these issues as well?
Yes, I think that's on the next slide. So yes, so we provide educational service to Amish people, both practicing and non-practicing, but most of the services we provide are to practicing Amish who are inside reaching out.
Okay.
Or to people who are non-Amish but have Amish neighbors or clients, and reach out and try to help them on their behalf. And then the other thing we just started doing that we discovered in the past, several years, we really need to develop Amish cultural literacy training to counter the narrative that nothing is wrong, nothing is going on. So that's also sort of like the barriers come from both the inside and the outside. And we've started doing that where like healthcare providers, social workers, first responders, training them how to, just be, culturally sensitive, but also be on the lookout for signs and be aware that, this child, might be abused, or like this is something that we're starting, depending on the state, is easier than others. But like Amish teachers, for example, depending on the state, are mandated reporters, but none of them are getting trained. And they wouldn't even know how to, like, they don't even know that physical abuse is a crime or child abuse. And so there's just so much work to do. And there's this issue of that even if a teacher or anyone in the Amish community knew that a child was being sexually abused, for example, they would just, if they said anything, would just report it to one of the bishops or the ministers, who most likely are offenders themselves. I mean, we have way too many documented cases of members of the clergy who have a sexual assault history. And that's the other big thing, that depending on the state, again, there has been a lot more awareness by other organizations. In the state of Pennsylvania, for example, you can find articles every so often of, an Amish bishop or male going to prison, or at least getting, going to court or something like that. But just as in the mainstream American cases, there's just not, the criminal justice system does not favor the victim all too often. And so it's a big headache and losing battle at times. But, the thing, so it's been sort of like, when we talk about like, what are the challenges or the struggles, it's like, well, which battles do we pick is kind of.
Does this sometimes feel like, do you feel like Sisyphus sometimes rolling this boulder uphill, and then you come back the next day and it's fallen down again? Yeah, totally. And that's where I finally, realized, okay, the best way forward, the most effective way forward for making sustainable progress is to train others who aren't Amish, who don't have that background, but are passionate about the cause, passionate about children's rights, passionate about education, who are willing to do the kind of groundwork and legwork once they're equipped with the the education, the background. They understand that they have our support. They know that if they do go into the communities and they, blow the whistle, they're not going to get backlash from the press and the media, that we're there to say, yes, you're doing the right thing, and to support them against those who are advocates and proponents of Wisconsin v. Yoder, who don't want to overturn. Those are the ones who are the biggest problem, trying to prevent us from doing this work. So what kind of, I really like this approach, both working to educate and inform inside the Amish communities, but also maybe even more importantly, working on the outside, folks like myself, and just to kind of understand that this isn't an idyllic lifestyle, and that there are issues that are common in so many other religions that are endemic in these communities as well. Yeah. And the examples you gave about educating first responders and medical personnel, I had never considered that. That's brilliant in my view.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that big boulder hasn't fallen back down. That's what I hit on as well. We realized that in order to mitigate that backlash from the non-Amish sympathizers of the Amish, who are mostly, those behind Wisconsin v. Yoder staying in place, in order to respond to that, where usually what we got in the beginning was just, oh, you're anti-Amish. It's like, oh, come on, I'm Amish. How can I be anti-Amish? Which goes to the whole, identity thing that I'll talk about later. But it's sort of like, okay, yeah, this also happens in other insular and fundamentalist religions, such as ultra-Orthodox Jewish, Jehovah's Witness, born again fundamentalist Christian, conservative Catholics, the conservative fundamentalist Muslims, the Mormons. There's this whole list of religious groups that the same things are happening. And when we launched our first conference, our first annual conference, that was the design of the conference, was bringing in, featuring speakers from different religious backgrounds who could speak to these similar issues and problems, all stemming from educational deprivation at the heart of it. And now those who were against us couldn't say, oh, we're picking on the poor Amish anymore.
Right.
You're just, mad because of whatever, you're just, rebellious or something, whatever their terminology was, but basically trying to dismiss me, as, just somebody who has a chip on her shoulder or something like that. And it didn't matter, that I was it's abused, right? It's like, oh no, you're just throwing a hissy fit, you're a spoiled brat or something like that. But yeah, so after that, it was, this is not unique to the Amish. This is something that's a common thread for fundamentalist, closed religious communities.
Yeah. It sounds like. Go ahead, Eric.
Nope, Ellen, it's all you.
Okay. It also sounds like, what you're talking about too is like this demystifying, like fighting a lot against that, because, like before I got educated on the subject, you just think like the Amish are quirky and they have like close families and, they just want to like live off the grid and, they're down home and all this type of stuff. And then you find out that they have the same problems that the rest of us do. It's just that it's because they're so insulated and we have this sort of romantic view of it, mm-hmm. that they kind of get almost ignored, which serves them, if they want to keep, what's going on private, but it also causes, on the other hand, it causes all this suffering and frustrations to the people that are in those communities.
Yeah, and that's what Wisconsin versus Yoder, that case was really, this point at which the religious right who were involved with the case, who pushed it through and paid the Amish legal bills to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, they were invested in that ruling going in their favor, not because they gave a shit about us Amish. It was only because if they could get that pushed through, then they could get pushed through other more extreme religious freedom exemptions. And we can see that, we can track that from, 1960s, 1970, from Wisconsin v. Yoder all the way to now, that yes, that was definitely a landmark case. It was not a landmark case for religious freedom or religious liberty, but it was a landmark case for extreme religious freedom, mm-hmm. like where it goes out of the bounds of your rights, where it actually infringes on others' rights. So, the children's rights were never, ever considered or talked about or covered. The children were not appointed a guardian ad litem who was supposed to advocate for them, like basically be their attorney on behalf of the children. That was completely just ignored. And so even were the Amish women, they had no voice either in the case. It was all two traditional Amish men, one beachy Amish man.
Beachy, like
beachy Amish. No, so it's Beachy is a common traditional Amish last name, and
okay.
And so the Beachy Amish were somebody who was traditional Amish, decided that he's upset with certain rules, laws of the traditional Amish, and he's going to start his own little spin-off group. And so of course they name it after him. And so it's called Beachy Amish.
That was not what I pictured. I pictured a man with like an Amish beard and like a Hawaiian shirt and like swim trunks and sandals with socks.
Now that you
like a beachy, like this traditional Amish guy, like riding to the beach on his bike. That was the visual that came into my brain.
I gotta create some graphics like with that to describe in our like literature, social media. definition of beachy Amish.
It's got a hang loose bumper sticker on the buggy. Oh man.
Oh my God. So yeah, that's also another thing that in the case, it was never addressed that the beachy Amish are not traditional Amish. Everything hinged around the traditional Amish. And yet somehow, like, the beachy got grandfathered in.
Oh, okay.
And the case also pretended that this only applies to the Amish, because they have this sincerely held belief. That's the term. And they've had this for, hundreds of thousands of years. And therefore, that means that they should have this exemption, and it's only for them. But of course, the Supreme Court justices knew that anybody else could point to that case and use it as a precedent. But it's just the whole like hypocrisy and of the case just infuriates me. Like pretending like, oh, we never knew that this could apply to anyone else.
That was the whole plan all along. And I mean, we see that even now with the little tiny Supreme Court decisions or court decisions, and they just build upon it and build upon it until they get where they want to go. Yeah. So we say, that case was decided, it's unconstitutional, the decision, and it really is. It was not constitutional. And it's all about the parents and not about the children. And people just tend to forget that children are American citizens. They're U.S. citizens with with rights, and not owned by the parents or the state or whoever. And so that's part of like what we're trying to do, is like raise awareness about the rights of children, that really comes down to that as well. And as great. Yeah, you're perfect. You're going to talk about it.
Okay. So here's the past, current, and upcoming projects section. So I talked a little bit about the annual conferences. That's where we talk about how to bridge the cross-cultural and cross-insular or cross-fundamentalist religious gaps. And so the cross-cultural gap would be just the generic mainstream America, non-Amish America versus the traditional Amish. And then the cross-insular fundamentalists is the different religious groups that I mentioned that have so many similar, the experience is so common. And then internship programs, we have that to create a new generation of social justice advocates. So that could be, in education or law or healthcare or whatever. Social justice kind of like is an umbrella for all of it. And so that we have been running for 2 years, I think. So that was one of the first steps towards realizing, we need training. We need to provide authentic Amish cultural training, because there's just the books that you find, or the documentaries, or the so-called documentaries, reality TV, you get a one-sided, very biased, unrealistic picture.
So with the conference, are only folks from the Amish community able to check it out, or is it?
Oh, no, this is public. We want everybody to come. And we are having our third annual. We didn't have any in 2020 and 21 because of the pandemic. But now we're having our third annual in March or April. We're still waiting on those dates, hoping to get that finalized within the next few weeks. And it'll be all virtual, all online via Zoom. Okay. And that was sort of like the up and down. We thought we would have one this year, but then Columbia University kept changing their guidelines about who was allowed on campus and who wasn't. At the end, we just had to scrap the 21 event. So we're going to do it virtual, just to be on the safe side, so we can go ahead and get it planned. but it'll be a 3-day event, and we're focusing on the 50th year anniversary, or commemorating the 50 years of Wisconsin versus Yoder. It actually starts.
This took place in the 70s, and it's coming up on 50 years.
Yep.
Oh crap! Yep. I'm getting old.
We're all getting old here. We're all getting old.
So, what kind of discussions or talks can someone expect if they were to go to or attend the con? Oh, and how much does it cost?
Well, first, you're going to be speaking, so tell us what you're going to be talking about.
I'll just be talking about RfR in general.
That's so important. That's another thing that we realize in terms of sort of like cloning ourselves, or how can we provide all these services that Amish people need, is to find trustworthy organizations and individuals who are already doing this kind of work. And that's what RfR is doing, is providing this much needed peer support and secular therapy directory. I mean, that's huge. And so that's going to be one of the parts of the conference, is just focusing on services. Here are various organizations or individuals who are providing vetted secular services. And then the other aspects of it, we always do something on Wisconsin versus Yoder. Until that's overturned or invalidated, we will always talk about Yoder. And so we're looking we have a couple keynote candidates in mind. And of course, the ones that we really, some of the ones our number one, I shouldn't say, that we have a favorite, because everybody's important, but some are more in demand than others. So we're sort of, pushing it out as much as we can, hoping to get a yes, but if not, it's going to be fantastic. We'll have some amazing keynote speakers who talk about constitutional law, like they're familiar with religion and division between church and state, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So they'll definitely. So that's going to be the keynote speaker, somebody who we have 3 candidates, and they're all equally fantastic. It's just a matter of who can say yes. And so that kind of kicks off. That's the main thing. Keynote. We'll have a keynote speaker one day, and the second day, and then the third day is more like panels and support groups and that kind of stuff. A little bit more. Not informal, but still kind of, and if it were offline, everybody, we would have an after party, and those, usually go until after midnight, which is that's the worst part, that it's virtual. So we're thinking about how can we do an offline after event. So we'll see what we can do, what we can come up with, but it's such a pain with everything.
Well, we can have a drinking game. Every time someone says Yoder, we can just
I love it. Drink. Yeah.
How much is it? Would it cost to?
Yes. So we are doing early bird tickets, which is $87 for all 3 days. But then the closer it gets to March, April, whatever it is, the higher it's going to go. And it'll be around $200 for general admission.
Perfect.
So don't put it off if you want to go. Or, if the price tag isn't an issue, then, no worries. And then we also have plans to, for people who are worried about whether or not they can make the actual 3-day event, we're going to record everything. So if you buy a ticket and you can't make it, something comes up, or you can't catch everything, you'll get access to the replays for 30 days or something afterwards. So that's something that shouldn't deter you if you can't do everything in person or at the time live.
Brilliant.
Awesome sauce.
So
I can have some of that for Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
exactly.
And if anyone here wants to present, we are, except for the services sort of spotlight part of the conference, we're featuring only women and those who identify as women or LGBTQ. Mainly, if you're cisgender male, you're not eligible, not because we don't like you, but because we just want to make a statement and draw attention to the fact that the children and the women and the LGBTQ didn't have a voice. They weren't represented 50 years ago. And so we're bringing in, of course, supportive males and all of that, like Eric, with our services or found, sort of spotlight. And so you're still included, but I hope that's not offending anyone.
No, I think that I really admire raising the voices of the folks who have been denied these opportunities in the past. And just one day is dedicated to some presentations with folks like myself, but the other days are totally raising the voices of women and LGBTQ folks, and I love it. I think that's perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Well, our board members were all behind it too, so that okay. And so the culture training, I think I talked about that. So we're aiming towards long-term is that our programs, our courses will be offered through universities, that you can get credit for it, or you can get continuing education credits if you're a healthcare professional or legal professional, whatever it is. So that's the long-term view, is to slowly get our curriculum into accredited universities or as part of a program. And then the Wisconsin versus Yoder, that's one of the things that I wanted to, that was in response to Eric asking the question, what is one accomplishment you're the most proud of? And proud of everything, but especially putting the Yoder case on the map. Like, we started that, and until, I started talking about it and made it the focus of the annual conferences, nobody who wasn't a lawyer or a religious, person who was invested in Yoder, nobody else knew about it. And that's also why I asked the poll question, have you ever heard of this case before? Because I want to see, are we reaching anybody? Does anybody know about this?
Would you like me to pull up the poll results?
Yeah, what is it?
All right, let me share those right now. The vast majority of people, 71%, said no, they've never heard about it. But there were a few people who have heard about it, 14%, and another 14% weren't sure. So slowly but surely, you're getting it out there. And I think after this discussion, there's going to be another 46 people or more who know about it.
Yeah, I mean, that actually is 14% is huge. So
good.
Yeah, so we are getting the word out somehow. I'm just curious, of those who heard about it, who knew about it, how did they find out about it? Did they know about it through the previous episode I did, or somehow?
That's how I knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah, folks, type it in the chat if you knew about it, how you heard about it.
And then what we have in the works is a documentary. That documentary we did during COVID, or like right before COVID hit. And then of course, like, COVID messed up everything in terms of getting it picked up by a network or marketing and all of that. So I don't know what the status is of that, but we'll have an update at the conference, if not sooner. But hopefully we can do a screen it at the conference. I'm not sure. It just it might be. It's probably not possible if it hasn't been sold yet, or whoever buys it, wants rights to it. So, but maybe we can do a little bit.
What is the premise of the documentary?
That was going through Amish country looking for a plaintiff for Wisconsin versus Yoder. And so that's a very complicated process. Like, how do you overturn Yoder? How do you overturn a Supreme Court case? Well, you have to find someone who has standing. Standing means, the law considers you were injured and it's not outside the statute of limitations. Like you have, yeah. And it's very much a catch-22 for someone who was raised Amish, because the argument by the opposing side is, well, if you manage to somehow escape and flee with only the clothes on your back and somehow get into high school and college, well, then now you're no longer injured. It's just ridiculous. So we thought we had a plaintiff. We did find somebody who was within the statute of limitations, and then he decided he doesn't think education is important after all. So it was a very heartbreaking how it turned out. For me, it was just it just underlines the issue with the lack of education and the devaluing of education among the Amish and the non-practicing Amish population. Those who exit the religion are most of them just as anti-education as inside the church. So we have our work cut out for us. Yeah. But there's another pathway towards invalidating Yoder, which is changing legislation. And so that's something we'll be talking about at the conference, about how to go about doing that, getting it on the ballot. And you have a question?
What are I also see here, what are college readiness programs? What does that look like?
So that's something that we're seeking grant funding right now to fund a pilot program where we will offer basically an enhanced GED is how best to visualize it, where people can, and it'll be all online, but we're going to provide a special, very accessible mentoring where wherever you're at, because here's what happens with some Amish or those who come from educationally deprived backgrounds like ultra Orthodox Jewish, that you don't have the English language skills or writing skills to pass the language or English aspects of the GED, or if you have that, maybe you don't have the science and math. Most people don't have science and math, or they find it very hard to get to the point where they can pass the science and math. And so what they need is they need tutors basically who can meet them wherever they're at and just work closely with them. And so this will be geared towards closing the gap between Amish 8th grade and college entry, but it's going to be open to whoever identifies as needing that kind of service, because we don't think that we can get even 20 people who have come from the Amish to do this, because there's this big anti-education kind of attitude. And
so like the people that do leave, do they move to like Mennonite or other lighter forms of the Amish faith? Like they want to have more access to like technology and an easier way to life, but they still have those old ideas, like, a woman's place is like, in the kitchen and making babies, and, and education is bad. And they have all these like really weird ideas kind of mixed in with wanting more secular things in their lives.
Yes, you said it perfectly. That's exactly what's going on. And there's a huge mental health stigma among the Amish. And so to seek therapy, to acknowledge that you've been traumatized or have traumas, like all of that that's considered weakness and inferiority kind of. And even acknowledging, especially among the men, not so much the women, but the men, to acknowledge that they need more education, that they need to go, get a GED or pass a GED, that's considered a sign of weakness. And they I get so many reports from like just regular GD instructors who, the men that do come in from the Amish will just drop out because they don't. One of the big things is that that they're against is having a female teacher instructor.
Oh, wow.
Do they also drop out too? Because like there's this like the attitude that like you kind of already know everything, and like if you hit like a challenging subject, that you hit a little bit of a wall where they like become resistant to it and not work through it. Have you seen that at all? With that the need to like push through, having a harder time with education and pushing through those barriers when things do get hard?
Well, it's that, but I mean, it points to, my theory is, after everything that I've seen, is that their traumas get triggered from when they were in school, in Amish school, where and but they're not aware of that, they're not cognizant of that, and that's part of what our program will provide. That's why we call it an enhanced GED, among other things. Like, we're adding in that kind of like sort of mental health or self-awareness stuff, like learning here's how you study, here's some of how does this make you feel. Like, we have to do it at like a 3rd grade level and like sneak it in, kind of not let them know.
Right.
but somehow get them aware that, oh, it's not because you're stupid, it's because of like something happened, or you had a bad experience at school, or maybe you were told you're dumb or whatever. And so yeah, it's just a lot of like extra work that has to go in to get them to jump over those barriers.
So yeah, I have to imagine that's hard, especially if people that have like ADHD, or they're on the spectrum, or they or they're dyslexic and it's never been diagnosed. I'm just throwing out like common examples, and then they go into a formal setting to learn how to get their GED, and they're not even aware of certain things that they have to overcome, and nobody ever pointed it out to them, because I doubt anyone in the Amish community is getting training on learning disabilities.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I totally, I mean, that's a major component that I forgot about to mention. But yes, like unless you have dyslexia, you're not considered to have a learning disability, basically. Like ADHD, being on the spectrum, like none of that is tested or acknowledged, or very little. I mean, I'm sure there's some communities, some schools who might now like be a little bit more aware of that and consider that or acknowledge it, but we're talking about the average population or average school. They're not paying attention to that or acknowledging it. And so that's going to be part of like whoever's coming in, they'll get tested not only on wherever they're at with the various subjects, but also on the learning disabilities. Like they'll go through all of those various testing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
From what I understand, many of the children, Amish children, go to a public school, but are there, and then many are homeschooled. Are there some special Amish only schools that are operating as well?
So it's actually the opposite. Very few children go to public school.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know the data on that. That's another thing that we have to, we have to get that research done, which always points back to we need funding. It's not like we can just call up somebody and they're gonna know or tell us accurately. So most Amish go to private religious schools, parochial schools, and that was one of the things that came out of Yoder. That was the big contention or push, was to let the Amish have their own schools with Amish teachers who aren't state certified and don't have an education past the Amish 8th grade.
And I would imagine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that corporal punishment may still be involved, like spanking or striking with the rulers, like Catholic schools. Is that still probably a part of the Amish school experience as well.
Yeah, the teachers are, expected to spank or beat the children. It depends on
They're expected to do that.
Yeah, if the child, is not obeying them, they're, expected to punish them, which usually means, some form of physical. It just really depends on the teacher and how harsh it's going to be, because a lot of the teachers are barely out of the 8th grade themselves. And most Amish teachers are girls before they get married. They get married young, so they don't have a lot of years to teach before they're married. And so a lot of them are not, I don't know. It just depends on the disposition of the teacher, how willing and, how much she wants to physically, abuse a child or spank a child. I've never seen the use of rulers in my experience, or if I have, I forgot about it. But like having a leather strap and taking a kid out, outside and, using the strap on them, that's not unheard of. I mean, that's, yeah.
I would imagine that would also contribute to some reluctance in pursuing education if that was the experience that you had tied to learning and school, was being whipped and spanked.
Oh my God, why did I not think of that before? Of course, I never made that connection, which tells me how normal that is. Because I just, oh my God, yeah, no wonder. Because if you were, beaten for not doing well in school or refusing to do your work because you have a learning disability, how are you supposed to do well in school?
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So here are just some success stories that you had asked for. So here's something, a practicing Amish wife and husband. They're inside the church who appreciated our help. Those are far and few in between, where it's actually the wife and the husband, but that was a major case that we helped. In the end, didn't turn out the way we wanted, and I can't give away too many details because of confidentiality, but it was, just a heart-rending case.
Do you mind if I read that? If you can go back and I can read that for the folks who are on the phone. If it weren't for the Amish Heritage Foundation and their dedicated staff, we would never have been able to stand up to the abuse inside our church. We would have just given up. And that was testimonial from a practicing Amish wife and husband.
And then here's one from a female college student. Of course, she had to leave the church. And she says, the Amish Heritage Foundation has provided me with life-changing emotional support, influence, and guidance. I don't feel so alone anymore. And cool. She was doing school part-time and working on getting her bachelor's. And then an Amish male 18-year-old, when I escaped, I didn't even know if I had a birth certificate. The Amish Heritage Foundation helped me get documented right away so I could get a job and be recognized as an American citizen. I
had never considered, do they have in-home births? Are they given a social security number?
That's the first thing that went into my head. I'm like,
yeah,
no birth certificate? What?
It depends on the family and on the community, but we have so many teens coming to us asking to get documented, help with getting their documentation. Some have a birth certificate on record. They just never even heard of a birth certificate themselves. And we're able to, research it and find out if that was filed. Others don't have a birth certificate at all. They're completely undocumented.
So I'm sorry, I just had a quick question. So did the Amish participate in the census or anything? Like, how does the government keep track of their the population within these communities?
Well, it is again going to depend on the community, on what the local church decides, whether or not you're allowed to participate in the census or not. They, at the end of the day, can claim religious exemption from that, because we don't, because the whole, like, the premise of the Amish and Wisconsin v. Yoder and everything is that, oh, we don't rely on the government, we don't use government aid for anything. And so if you're not using government aid, supposedly, then the census shouldn't be something that
oh, okay,
there,
all right, it just,
you know?
it's very, it just, some of this stuff, I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, it's just
Oh,
some
no.
of this stuff, it's very foreign and strange to me that, you know, the inner workings of how a lot of this stuff happens, you know, because I just figured, you know, well, they must have birth certificates and social security numbers, and they just live like a rural lifestyle and are just a little quirky and weird. And now, like, when you go and, like, you're looking at the whole thing, you're like, huh, that's odd. That's really weird.
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking these questions, because I, you know, tend to, this is all normal for me. And I forget sometimes to point out these things, like this birth certificate thing. I would have totally forgotten about that if I hadn't had it on my slide.
I remember kind of, as I was starting to go out on my own and, you know, applying for jobs and social services and driver's license and passports, the very basic thing I really needed was just to prove that I was born and the age that I had and that I was a US citizen. And so it's, again, that's another hurdle for folks who want to leave the Amish communities to and get into the, good Lord, and get into society outside of geez, that's what a wow.
It's all this stuff that we've kind of take for granted, you know. You know.
It's really, before I forget, and then I'll let you answer. The way to think about this is the concept of Amish refugee, which is what I, you know, finally, you know, came to. I'm like, oh, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, refugee experience. We're native-born citizens having the refugee experience. We come from 300 plus years of American citizenship, but we're still refugees or having that experience.
Is there any issues that crop up with the Homeland Security with people not having birth certificates or documentation? Like if we had people entering the country without any documentation, they would be sent back possibly or dealt with way differently. Are there any issues that crop up about that?
I'm able to be successful with it because I know how to approach the various agencies. But I'm also, you know, I've always had a very legal mind, like mentality, and I'm also was, you know, pretty highly educated. You know, I'm, you know, so I'm, just because of my personal like abilities and talents and interests, I'm able to make the case to get this. Get these these individuals documented, these citizens documented. But over and over, the people who come to me will say that they've been trying to get this for 3 years, 2 years, you know, 5 years, whatever it is, before they find out about the Amish Heritage Foundation.
So is this another service that American or that the Amish Heritage Foundation?
Yeah, we help you get documented. It just sounds so odd to say that, but
it really kind of does. But I like how you came up with that refugee kind of description. That I can see it now. Yeah.
And then here are just a couple testimonials from students and clients and interns about the Amish cultural literacy courses. One said, I never really thought about the implications of this lack of education and strict insular way of life, especially on women and children. And I now know some specifics, whereas I only knew general assumptions before. And another person says, I now feel able to understand when the Amish are brought up in politics, mostly regarding excessive religious liberty exemptions. This extends to similar groups such as Mennonites and ultra-Orthodox Jewish. And then someone here says, curious, inspired, and passionate. That's how I feel after learning even just the bare basics about the Amish from the intro course. I see now why we need a movement to catalyze change for Amish children and women. And so that kind of like just demonstrates why this training is so important. You know, like you didn't even know about these issues, right, Helen?
No, I didn't. No, I'm learning. Like I said, like I learned a lot from the last talk you did, and I'm learning a lot more about these issues that are pretty much invisible to a lot of us. You know, that these things are happening, and we've, you know, and like I said, we have this very romanticized view, and we're forgetting about the real harm and these issues that are going on in these communities.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, like, let's not forget about, you know, the other, you know, closed groups, you know, that also aren't documented. You know, like this again is not unique to the Amish. You know, there are others, you know, who are, depending on, you know, what group they're in, they didn't even know who was the president of the United States. You know, I've gotten stories from that, from like fundamentalist Mormons who thought like their Mormon leader was the president.
Wow.
And that's you know, like that's another thing that's common among, you know, Amish kids. Depends on what kind of education they did get in the Amish schools, but some might not know who the president is. One of the Amish kids who came to us for help was born in a state that borders Canada and didn't know where Canada was.
That's just basic geography.
I'm like,
we learned.
Yeah, this is
Wow.
like there's just my brain is like, what? Like, how can you not know where Canada is or who the president is? It's just it's wild and frustrating.
Yeah, and even for me, like it shocks me, and which is why I need to, you know, just keep asking these same questions for people who come to us, like put them through like the standard sort of like intake that, you know, we finally developed, because even I assume, oh, you know where Canada is, but no, not everybody was eager to look at the, you know, the globe in the Amish schoolroom like I was. I mean, that's how I learned. Like I wasn't taught in a formal class where Canada was. I just, you know, read the globe because I wanted to know.
Well, to be fair, if you asked me to point out like Iran on a map, I probably couldn't find it unless it was labeled. So, so to be fair.
Oh, you know, it's not. To be fair, it's not the same.
I know, but I'm just saying, like, you know, I'm trying to be like I'm trying to give a little bit, you know.
I hear you. But this is something where, I mean, what you're saying is one of the familiar sort of pushbacks to people who oppose us. And so my response is, so you want to be mediocre? You want to be, is that your standard for success? Is mediocre?
Yes, it is. I'm just kidding. I strive for mediocre. Just kidding. I have to make a joke about it when I hear this stuff, because it's hard to hear.
It is, and it's just, you have to laugh or you'll scream, and so
yeah, exactly.
try to be as humorous as possible.
Right.
So anyway, some of the challenges, the previous slide said funding. It all comes down to funding. So we finally, I think, got part of that solved, which is just, you know, the big barrier was realizing that I couldn't delegate the grant writing to a development director or writer. You know, even somebody wanted to volunteer couldn't write grants for us because they just didn't know all the issues and couldn't make the argument. So I think we kind of finally got through that hurdle. So hopefully this upcoming year we'll have a good year when it comes to funding. And then
is that where you get most of your funding, is through grants, or can folks like myself contribute some?
You can definitely donate as an individual. Like, we'll take your money. But yeah, grants are where most of our money comes from. We just don't, have the volunteer force to, do this kind of like fundraising on the grassroots level for us, from individual donors. And so it made like sort of the biggest ROI was the grants, was to go through the grants. But that will, change as we get funded better and we can hire people, to work permanently. Then of course that will like make the fundraising easier as we go along.
Where can people go to donate if they wanted to contribute?
You can go to amishheritage.org/give, and we are a 501c3, which means whatever is lawful, you can get tax deducted. You can get a tax deduction for it. And our EIN is on our website on the About page, somewhere on the About page. Starts with 82. That's the only thing I can remember. But yeah, anything you want to donate, any amount, you can make that on that page.
amishheritage.org/give. Okay, got it.
And we're also, for the conference, we always have sponsorship opportunities. So those usually come from businesses or corporations, but individuals, if they want to be a sponsor and get, some, press and media and shout outs to our newsletter in exchange, all of that information will be on the conference page once we have it ready to accept ticket sales.
Tell us about the future of Amish Heritage Foundation. What's coming down the line?
So this is the broad future, not the immediate, but the longer term, although some of it is immediate, which is the overturning the Yoder case and introducing legislation to make education a federal right, a federal constitutional right for all U.S. citizens. And so that we will go into a lot more detail at the conference, and also before, leading up to it, if we have some answers. But I really don't think we'll see that until it'll be a result from the conference about how people can start on a local level with their state to lobby for this right.
That sounds like a big job to do.
Yeah. Well, it's, a big job trying to find someone with standing to overturn Yoder. I mean, it's just crazy. Like I can go into more detail later if someone is interested, but it can make your head ache. And legislation, just putting it on the ballot seems like that might in the end be the way that it'll come about. Just like how we got gay marriage, for example, or actually, I don't even know, that was not gay marriage, how we got medical marijuana. Like, how they did that, started that in Colorado,
States, right.
Washington. So
Colorado.
This is the approach we're looking at to get this.
So it sounds like the approach is to build momentum in the states, and then once this majority or so many states have been taking this on, then it's like, okay, the federal government now has to do something about it. Does this look like it's would be an amendment to the U.S. Constitution? Is this what it's looking like?
Well, here's the thing, which is, we have attorneys who advise us, who are advising us on Yoder, have been from the beginning about how to go about overturning it, or the constitutional ins and outs of it. And the argument is that there is not an explicit right to education on the federal level. However, there is an implicit right to education, because if you don't have a certain level of adequate education, which changes as with the times, then how are you going to have a citizen, a citizenry who knows how to serve effectively on the jury, or do other things that are that we need in order to have a flourishing democracy, in order to have a healthy democracy. You need like a certain type or a certain standard of educated citizens to do that. So that's the argument for overturning the Yoder case. But even that we can't do without somebody who has standing. And to find that person is just like it's looking for a needle in the haystack. And so hopefully we can get, while we're looking for that person, we're also getting education as a constitutional right in every state that it isn't currently. They're not the majority of states. I think there's like maybe only 20 or so states actually have it in their state constitution that you're entitled to education.
It just seems to make sense to me, and our legal system doesn't always make sense.
So what's the pushback against, like, just having this in, to be like federal law, like it's a right for you to have education. I'm curious, like what pushback there would be to that.
Well, it's the same people who push Yoder through.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Are pushing back. I mean, they're very, very, well-funded and very, good at what they do. They know constitutional law and they know how to argue, but they're wrong.
Because they were educated.
Yeah, but we had.
I love the irony.
Exactly. But we had a crappy attorney who went up against, the opposing side in the Yoder case. It's like, why were you so shitty in your argument? Like, you sucked. I could have done better than you. Like, what was going on? I'm just like, were you paid off? Like, what was in it for you to not argue, present a better argument, a stronger argument? So I don't know. Like, I just, there's no way that it, we have enough of a voting population who is for education than those who aren't. And it just needs to be publicized correctly, properly. We need to get the word out. And social media, thanks to the advent of social media now, it's a lot easier to get the message across. It's also easier for everything to just get lost in the noise. But in the end, social media is, to have all those platforms is a very, very good thing. And I really do see the federal right for education going in tandem with the trend towards more and more voting Americans being secular. So as the American population becomes more secular, or identifies as non-religious or we will get something like the very obvious right to education through.
Well, we're running a little short on time. What else do we have?
I think that's it.
How to get involved. Yeah, let's talk about it. Go to that slide.
Yeah, one slide is left. How to get involved.
I love it.
So we already talked about giving. You can shop as well. We have some merch. It's just amishheritage.org/shop. And you can also use Amazon Smile. You probably know how to do that already with RfR. And then you can train with us. That's just become an intern or take some of our courses, and then share the cause. Talk to everybody tell them about this. And that's
Torah,
it.
thank you so much for coming on and sharing about Amish Heritage. I had really no idea about this, and it was just completely not even on my radar. But having you kind of work through what a typical Amish person experiences, and I can clearly see the need for the Amish Heritage Foundation, and it looks like what programs you're creating and offering are just brilliant. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it.
Thank you so much. It just makes all this work worth it, all the tears to hear that. It actually is It makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got quite a few questions. I think we'll have to pick some of them. But Helen, you want to start us off? Go ahead and pick one.
Sure. I'll pick a question. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to ask like a little bit more of a personal question. Do you still keep in touch with any of your old Amish community?
Not my immediate family, who, by the way, my parents decided it was okay to resign about 5 years after I escaped. So they, went total like gung-ho, born-again fundamentalists. And so I'm even worse, even more going to hell than I was before.
You evil heathen.
That's right. And I do talk to one side of my family, and those are the aunts, uncles, and cousins who remember me who grew up with me, and they have those nostalgic memories. And I also wasn't baptized. Like I got out before I was forced into getting baptized, and so there's a loophole in Amish law that they can do business with people who aren't baptized. Whereas if I'd been baptized, there'd be this like official excommunication in place.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that
question?
either. I learned something else new.
We had a person asking, has Wisconsin v. Yoder been cited in a lot of the Supreme Court decisions? Like, is it just a small amount of citations, or has it been heavily cited over the years?
It will almost always seems to get cited or acknowledged in religious freedom issues. And when I say religious freedom, religious liberty, it's interchangeable, liberty or freedom. And so even the most recent one, I believe, is in the case of California, something about a case where the kids wanted to go back to private school, in-person private school. You can maybe do some research and Google it, but Yoder is almost always acknowledged. Maybe not like really attention drawn to it, and I think purposely they don't want attention drawn to it, but it's there very much in the minds and awareness of the Supreme Court justices.
So kind of follow up to that, is there like legislative workarounds that they're trying to do with that case?
The California case?
No, I'm sorry, for the Wisconsin versus Yoder.
I'm not aware of any legislation being done. I mean, this is, unless somebody else does something before we do, we'll be the first people to actually come up with a plan on a legislative level.
Is Wisconsin versus Yoder also cited in a lot of just non-Supreme Court cases? I guess if it has to do with religious freedom, then they kind of, any case in the United States, they kind of cite this as well. Is that the case?
Well, it generally, it's not really discussed outside law cases. It is usually, like in law school, everybody in law school, to my understanding, is introduced to the case it's mentioned because it is considered a landmark case. But as one of my constitutional law friends said, yeah, we heard about it for 5 minutes and then moved on. It's dismissed like that. It's just routinely dismissed and made out to be not important or doesn't affect you. It's only an Amish case. And then everybody who is in the religious rights legal space definitely does know about Yoder and will always use it and point to it whenever it serves them. And we can see this in like the homeschooling movement, for example. Like they are, completely 100% dependent on Yoder remaining in effect, because they put so much into their homeschooling stuff, that depends on Yoder.
Got it. I think we got time for one final question.
Okay, so are there Amish communities outside the United States, like an example for like Australia or other countries, or does this seem to be like an American institution?
It's only North America. There was that. So anybody who thinks they're Amish in Australia, no, those are imposters. They're pretending to be Amish. You know, they're not. Go to any Amish bishop and he'll say, "What?" No. So this is
posers.
Yeah. I mean, that's an example of how, you know, how we Amish are just routinely exploited for the benefit of whoever's exploiting us.
Right.
Yeah. So there are, you know, offshoots of Amish that are, you know, it's easy to confuse, you know, conflate them with Amish. So there's part of that. But if you just, you know, buy some Amish clothes and walk around in Amish clothes and have a little, you know, commune or, you know, like anybody's going to think, oh, you're Amish. They're not, if you're not educated, right? You're not going to know how to figure out, is that guy or person like actually, you know, Amish or not.
Torah, thank you so much. Before we kind of wrap up the show, do you have any final thoughts or words that you want to say?
I don't think so. I mean, just reach out if you have more questions. You can email me. You can also text me at 212-634-4255. I'm always happy to answer questions. That said, sometimes, you know, I'm overwhelmed. So if you really want your question answered, just be a squeaky wheel.
You had asked me to remind you about that tabletmag.com article. Do children have a right to education? Did you want to briefly talk about that?
I will just like mention that California case is in there. So whatever that California case is, there's a paragraph or so about it in that Tablet Magazine article. And that article is like heavily linked with resources and all of that. And I have not had time yet to go through and check out all the resources. So some of them like may not be good articles or what I consider, you know, credible sources, but okay. The article itself is like as well as can be expected. And that's because the writer, you know, the journalist really actually, you know, asked me a lot of questions and was very diligent about getting it accurate. So I appreciate that. Anabaptist is one of the terms that the article brings up, and the writer, the journalist, says it means to be baptized again. That's actually not what it means. It means one baptism in for us Anabaptists, like, because our infant baptism was not considered a valid or, you know, baptism, and so we're only baptized once. But you know, there's just some technicalities like that. But for the most part, you know, I mean, it's definitely a huge improvement. I can see that we've made a lot of progress in terms of getting accurate articles out from journalists who reach out to us and interview us.
Got it. Torah, again, thank you very, very much. This is your second time on, and we've got a third one planned for the end of December, and I'm really kind of looking forward to that as well. I'm not going to quite spoil it for you folks, but it's going to be a fantastic one, very relevant to our current times. All right. Well, that kind of wraps up the discussion part of RfRx. Like I had mentioned, this isn't going to be the last one. We have got another one coming up next week, and it's with author Farron Wiley, and his discussion, or his talk, is entitled, "I Am Not Where I Was. Now Where Do I Go? Who the fuck am I?" Transitioning out of religion isn't easy. Many of us have built our personal identity around our religious worldview and community. But what to do when that's gone or slipping away? We may be left feeling perplexed, confused, depressed, anxious, any of those things in the aftermath of departing our long-held faith practices. This RfRx discussion is going to focus on strategies to rebuild a sense of self and self-worth after one's religious identity is stripped away, as well as making rational decisions about unhealthy behaviors in contrast with our previously had held sin consciousness, like our thoughts about like, oh, I can't do this because I'm going to sin. Helen?
Oh, sure. I thank you, Torah, for this wonderful talk. I learned a lot. It was wonderful, and I can't wait for your next one. So, can't get enough of RfRx or RfR. I'm going to tell you where to find us. So, if you want to see some previous RfRx recordings, as mentioned before, you can go to our YouTube channel, and all of our previous recordings are up there. You can, if you have any questions, comments, inquiries, you want to tell us how wonderful and incredible we are, you want to send us death threats, please give us an email at rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. You can also visit our blog, which Eric's going to put up a link for as well. This is a really great blog to hear personal stories of people that have transitioned out of religion, from all different faiths and backgrounds and stuff like that, and help you along on your journey. We also have a podcast with previous episodes of RfR, and so go check out that, which Eric's also going to post a link for. And you can follow us on social media. That helps get the word out, and share all the things that we have going on. So please go to our Facebook page at Recovering from Religion. There's also a support group. So if you're looking for extra support outside of what we do here at RfR, and there's wonderful people on there. There are support coordinators on there that, along with people that are coming from religion and are from RfR. So you can go to our support group page and go talk to all those wonderful people on Facebook. You can go to the Twitter and go look for RfR org on the Twitter. And what's wonderful about that is just we announce all like our RfRx talks on there, or fundraisers, or other things that we have going on at over here on the most wonderful website on the internet. Also too, we are on the Instagram, we're also on the TikTok. A lot of the stuff can either be found through RfR.org or Recovering from Religion. Also too, you can sign up for our newsletter. And these will have wonderful resources for you, news, again, more news. We like spreading our news around, so you can find out more about that. You also get connected to more resources, published videos, and other blog posts. So that is it for me.
Folks, thank you so much for being here this evening. I have got a feedback poll like at every single time, and I'd love to hear what your feedback is on this talk and some of the other stuff to help direct our programming. While that feedback poll is going, I want to bring on a board member of Recovering from Religion. She is just a fantastic person and does so much more than just sit on a board for Recovering from Religion. Her name is Gwen. Gwen, are you there, my friend?
I am here. Hi, Eric. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you. This was just such a great talk. And again, I'm not always able to make it to the actual sessions, but I listen faithfully on YouTube. So if you found this meaningful, share it with your friends and, get the word out that not only can you join and converse with the speakers, but get it out there. RfR has been around for a while, as some of you know, and one of the things we like to just share with you here is just, and I think it's just how important and meaningful this is to so many, and how you can help us continue to help others. And as we heard listening to Tar tonight, it's not just the people who are in the religious areas that are impacted right now by what's happening in the world and these rulings, the Wisconsin v. Yoder. And thank you. I thought I had completely blocked that from my prior homeschooling days. And, you brought all of those days back and fighting for our rights to not educate our children. Extreme Baptist, not Amish, but I longed for those really cool dresses that they wore. I don't know, color me weird. But anyway, thank you for being here tonight. And again, as an organization, your volunteer hours, your dollars, it's getting to that time of the year where maybe you've got a little extra matching available at your company, or you just are like, hey, I want to do a little extra something this Thanksgiving. Where can I help out? And, I mean, honestly, this organization that, Tara was telling us about tonight, absolutely fantastic. And again, here at RFR, things take money. So we appreciate that. And spread the word, because our YouTube channel, I believe, Eric, it's now monetized, right? So yeah. When you watch RfRx, you contribute pennies to our bottom line. So, that's a joke for those of you who've ever wanted to make it big as a YouTuber.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. No. So seriously though, thank you for tuning in tonight. And, Eric went over the different programs that are offered here. And honestly, I can't think of a better way to spend my volunteer hours than helping out here at RFR. And I hope you get as much benefit from that as well.